Hello everyone. I don't even know if I'm live or not. I'm a complete dunce at this stuff. Let's just wait a minute because I have a little circle going round and round. Oh, hello everyone. I think I'm live. Yeah, as you've no doubt gathered if you follow me on Twitter, I'm a complete dunce at all this stuff. I definitely have a kind of pre-social media brain. I hardly ever use Facebook, and it's a total miracle if this is actually working. So anyway, I hope you are all out there. And by all means, send me a message, and I think I'll get it on the left if I do. But first of all, just to say a huge, huge thank you to the four indies for inviting me on Lingham's, Booker, Bookish, and Forum Books. I'm really grateful to be given this opportunity to make a complete twerp of myself live on Facebook. So anyway, I hope that's all working. And what I'm going to try and do now is look at the questions that I was sent in advance that some of you have. And we're going to start with answering a few of those. And then I'm going to tell you a bit more about the latest book, Platform 7, which I've strategically positioned just out of sight. And then I'll be doing a short reading, and hopefully we'll have time for some more questions as well. And the whole thing will last around half an hour, unless I idiotically manage to pull the plug before then. Anything is possible. So first of all, we're going to go to the first question. And the first one I was sent was, which do you prefer, writing novels or non-fiction? And the answer is definitely novels. I'm a novelist to my fingertips. I do love non-fiction as well. I've done a fair amount of journalism. To start off with, I just did journalism in order to support the novel writing. And then I really enjoyed it. I wrote a how to write column for a Saturday newspaper for a while that was published as a book. I've got a couple of ideas for non-fiction books, but there's absolutely no doubt that novels are what I really want to do. I do think this is a bit controversial, but I do think that novels are the hardest thing to write of all, but maybe we'll get on to that. The next one I've got here, how different is it writing plays for radio? It's actually a long time since I've done a radio play. I used to do one between each novel, and I really, really enjoyed them because they're a collaborative medium. And the great thing about Radio 4, who I wrote the radio plays for, is how fantastically obsessed they are with getting everything right. So when you write a radio play, you get to go into the studio, watch it recorded. You get to see the sound effects guy arguing about what sort of train carriage would be on a certain line in a certain year in Kent, and making sure that they have the right sound effects for that particular train carriage. So radio plays are great. I haven't done one for a long time, but I have recently started doing some screenwriting, and there are a few developments in that I'm not allowed to talk about yet. Anyway, I'm finally calming down now, as opposed to talking at a great speed. So somebody just said hi from Somerset. Samantha, thank you. Hi, I know you're there. And a few other people have said hello, and it's working. And somebody, Tracy, said hi from Oswestry, and that you love Platform 7. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to hear that. The next one, talk to us about creative writing courses. I'm presuming these you mean the ones that I've done rather than the ones I teach at the moment. I'm actually a huge fan of what we might loosely call the creative writing project, as it exists in this country. I think what the best creative writing courses are actually about opening up access, because people do take notice of them. By people, I mean agents and publishers. They do provide contacts as well as tuition. They provide a sort of a writing life and a writing world, and a kind of a writing milieu for people who may not normally experience that kind of thing. I did one at the University of East Anglia when I was 23, many, many years ago. And I was very intellectually and emotionally immature when I did that course. But I think it was really the crucible in which I was formed as a writer. I wasn't very good, and I think the main thing I learned on that course was that I wasn't very good. and that if I was going to do this thing, I was going to have to work really, really hard for a very long time. So I think it was absolutely essential for me to learn that vital lesson very early on. I was in the same year as Anne Enright, the Irish fiction laureate. We were both unpublished students together, and of course she's absolutely huge now. And all I'll say is, me and Anne, we know where the bodies are buried in each other's pasts. I've also taught on the Faber Academy, run by my own publisher in London. I've taught Guardian masterclasses. I've done residential courses at the Arvin Foundation, so I'm sure many of you know about. You go for 5 days and you live in a beautiful country house somewhere. There's a huge number of courses out there, often involving exciting foreign travel. There's one you can do in Ubud in Bali that's run by Gold Dust. It's run by novelist Jill Dawson. You can go to Spain, you can go to France. And I just think anything that takes you away from your normal life and puts you in a setting where you leave all the other stuff behind, whether you're wife, husband, mother, father, friend, all the other daily domestic things you have around you. And for even a short space of time, you are first and foremost a writer. And I think if you can afford those, a lot of them offer scholarships and bursaries. If there's any way you can get to them, I'm a big fan of them. So I'm going to my list now, and I'm just having a little look at, I'm scrolling up. That's fantastic. Oh, great. I'm managing to work it. That's brilliant. Where did your love of reading come from? That's the next question. Gosh, what a good question. Where does it come from? I think that I was certainly quite a sort of isolated and bookish child from a very early age. I grew up on a sort of brand new housing estate on the edge of an East Midlands town, and sort of a few houses along from us in this very sort of modern 1960s bungalow that we lived in. A few houses along was just waste ground. And I distinctly remember lying to my parents and sneaking out of the house with a book in the pocket of my anorak, and sort of saying I was going to play with the other kids on the estate, and actually going and sort of hiding in a den that I'd built on this waste ground. It wasn't a great deal to do in the East Midlands in the 1970s, it has to be said. One of the few places that you could go and hang out on your own as a child was the local library. And that local library, it's quite a small, sort of unprepossessing building. It's a sort of single story red brick thing, but I would spend hours and hours in there. And I think, so many writers of my generation are formed in their local libraries, where it's one of the few things you can do for free as a child or as an adolescent with no access to any other art form. So I think that probably answers the question. There was a small cinema. It closed down during my childhood. There was no access to theatre or opera or concerts or art galleries or any other art form. But of course, the great thing about books is they're so portable and they can go in a child's anorak. So that's probably where it comes from, I think. Apple Tree Yard. Yes, somebody has asked. Apple Tree Yard was recently made into a very successful BBC drama. How did it feel to see your characters come to life on the small screen? This is a very common question. It won't surprise you to learn. The televisation of Apple Tree Yard was quite transformative for me as a novelist, really. For a start, it gave me the financial resources to be a full-time writer. Up until then, I'd always done part-time teaching, journalism, broadcasting, all sorts of jobs and odds and ends to make ends meet. And really, Apple Tree Yard meant that I could be a full-time novelist and really concentrate on novels for the first time in my career. And that was novel number 7, so it was quite a long haul. Seeing the characters come to life on the small screen was incredibly spooky. It's interesting with the main characters, particularly the main character of Yvonne. It was played by Emily Watson, And of course, you're on set and you're looking at Emily Watson, you're just going, oh my God, it's Emily Watson. And you feel so sort of overawed by her. She has such presence and such professionalism that you don't look at an actor of that stature and see your character, you see her. What was very interesting was that a lot of the smaller characters were cast very closely to how I described them in the book. So, for instance, Rosa, who's the husband's lover in the book, she's a young student, and she's described in very broad brushstrokes, a few sentences in the novel. And then I saw this young woman actor walk across the set for that scene, and it was like, oh my God, you're exactly how I imagined you. And at that point, it's really creepy because you think, I'm not just a novelist, I'm a magician. You know, I've actually conjured this person into being. And in fact, one of the assistant directors came up to me one day when we were filming, and he said, Louise, this must be really weird for you. He said, does it feel a bit as though if you click your fingers, we'd all go and disappear? And I thought, yeah, it really does feel like that. And the other thing you feel very aware of is the huge machinery that television involves, the millions and millions of pounds that are being spent on bringing your story to life. And you look at it and you see roads blocked off, and you see, you know, the makeup wagon and the catering van, and you just think, my God, this is all my fault. It's very strange, but I think it's probably worth saying that I was extremely lucky with Appletree Yard. I mean, not all novelists have such a happy and lucky experience, but I just had a really fantastic group of people involved making it. A wonderful producer called Chris Carey, Kudos Productions with the Independent Production Company, fantastic executive producer Amanda Levin, who pulled everyone together, and a screenplay done by Amanda Coe, who's really experienced and accomplished and also a novelist in her own right, and then a director called Jessica Hobbs, who was just superb. I think not all novelists have as happy or lucky experience as I did, but everyone was fantastic, and they really went out of their way to make me feel that I was part of the production and that I was welcome on set and in the editing suite. So happy and lucky was how I felt about that one. Platform 7, the new novel that I'm going to talk about in a bit, is in development with the same producer. So fingers crossed for that. Let me just have a look. Did I have... Oh, sorry, I missed one there. Were you surprised at how popular this was? And what happened when you got the call this was going ahead? When I got the call that Appletree Yard was going ahead, I would like to say that I punched the air and cracked open the champagne. But, you know, to be honest, my main reaction was one of skepticism, because I'd had so many author friends who had come really, really close to having things go into production. I mean, particularly with film, you really can have the plug pulled at the very last minute. Famously, a film called Tulip Fever, the novel brilliantly written by Deborah Moggock, that was days away from filming at Pinewood, I think, when the plug got pulled on that. So even when I was told the production had been greenlit with the BBC and everyone was getting very excited, a big part of me just thought, well, let's see, shall we? And then I think the first moment that I realised it really was going to happen was at the full cast read-through of the scripts. So it was 4 one-hour episodes. We all had this 4 scripts, and we all got together in a room, and it was actually just before filming started, but we had the cast there and just read it through around the table so that everybody involved knows what's going on. And that, looking around that room, that was when I met Emily Watson for the first time, and seeing all those people, I just thought, oh my God, this is actually going to happen. And that was probably a career highlight for me, was realising that was actually the case. Did I have any control over production? No, not at all. I mean, I was an associate producer. Still don't know what an associate producer is or does. I just know I was one. And which meant that I got I got kept up to date. I got to see the script. I went on set, but no, when you sell your TV rights, you have to accept that you are handing over control, and it's not your baby, and it's not even your novel really. They've got to take it and they've got to make it into something that's theirs, and that's fair enough, really. I think it's important to say that whatever happens with the TV production, your novel still exists. I mean, I loved what they did with the production, but even if they'd made a complete pig's ear of it, the novel is still the novel, and people can still go to the book to find out your original intentions. So, no, you just hand over control. Platform 7, somebody has mentioned, thank you. So, Platform 7, I will start. Hello everyone who's just joined. So Platform 7 is the new novel. It was out in paperback a couple of weeks ago, and obviously publishing a paperback in the middle of what we're all going through at the moment was a bit of a challenge. Obviously book tour and all personal events are cancelled, which is why we're doing things like this, and which is why actually I'm grateful to smart people like the 4 Indies for setting things like this up. So I'm going to talk a little bit in the way that I would if I was just at a literary festival presenting the book to you, and I will be doing a short reading as well. Platform 7 is my 9th novel, but I think I'm calling it a first because, as far as I know, it is the first novel that's ever been set almost entirely on Peterborough railway station. I announced this at every event I did for it when the hardback came out, and nobody corrected me. I have a very long relationship with Peterborough railway station. I grew up, as I said, in this small town in the East Midlands. And then I went off to university at Leeds. I left home when I was just turned 18. I did that MA in creative writing at the University of East Anglia in Norwich. And after that, I moved to London for the next 30 years of my life. And whenever I visited my parents or the town where I grew up, that would involve changing trains at Peterborough railway station. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Peterborough railway station, but if you're stuck on it and your train's been cancelled or delayed and it's a freezing cold winter night and you forgot your hat and you need a wee but the loos are locked and the wind is blowing across the fens, it can be a pretty grim place to be stuck. And my standing joke for many years was that if I died and went to purgatory, I would find myself trapped on Peterborough railway station. So I decided to write a whole book set there, which arguably was a rather perverse decision. So Peterborough railway station, as the novel opens, it's 4 a.m. And what I might do is I might just read the first couple of paragraphs to start off with, really just to give you an idea of the atmosphere. And then after I've done that, I'll talk a little bit more about the book, and then I'll leap forward and do a reading of about 5 minutes from a place later in the book. So the very early page, this is what you see when you open Platform 7. It is 4 a.m. The station is empty, but I'm not alone. I'm never alone. There are the others. And now there is the man. No one has seen him yet, apart from me. It is black at this hour, but the security lights throw a stark white glow across all 7 platforms. Every now and then a freight train passes through, and the air is filled with a slow screech and rumble. Then all falls quiet again, the silence broken only by the squabble of a couple of pigeons on platform 5. On the ground between platforms 2 and 3, a lone fox, small and silky, trots along the tracks. It pauses and angles its snout to sniff the freezing air before leaping up onto platform 2 in a relaxed and nimble fashion. As it passes beneath a light, its pelt glows chestnut, briefly, before it disappears into the dark. So that's how Platform 7 opens. And the person who's narrating this, you don't realise, know who it is at that point. It's on there at 4 a.m. in mysterious circumstances because it's closed to the public. And she sees a man, it turns out she's a she, who enters the station and crosses the covered walkway, the bridge to Platform 7. And she knows the station very well, and she knows the first train out of there is the 6:15 to Birmingham New Street. And if he's here for that, he's awfully early. And she realises that he's on the station to throw himself underneath a freight train. So she tries to prevent him, she tries to talk him out of it. And as the freight train comes in, he steps up from the bench he's sitting on and passes right through her and onto the tracks. And at that point, you realise she's already dead. She's a ghost. And she's the ghost of a woman who's died on the station in mysterious circumstances. At the point at which the novel begins, this ghost has no memory of who or what she was, although you later find out that her name was Lisa. But the next day after this appalling event, she hears the station staff talking and saying, oh, you know, just like that other one a couple of years ago. And she has a really strong sense that she was not a suicide. She doesn't know what happened to her, but she knows that she wasn't like the man, and that's not what she did. So really, Platform 7 is about a woman who's trying to solve the mystery of her own death, if you like. And the first third of the book, she's a ghost. She sees a young man, a young commuter on the station, and rather falls for him, follows him out of the station. At that point, she finds she's not trapped anymore. She's able to leave. And she thinks that love has set her free, although it turns out she's very mistaken about that. But the funny thing about Lisa is that although she can't communicate with the living world, she's not a poltergeist, she can't move objects, she can read the minds and tell the stories of the people who pass through the station. And so although she's a first-person narrator, she's also an omniscient narrator of the life and loves of the people who are on the station. And there's Dalmar, who's a security guard from Somalia, who is on the station as it opens at 4 a.m. There's Tom, who's a customer services manager. There's Melissa, the station manager. And just over the road, there's the British Transport Police building, and there's an inspector there, Inspector Barker, who plays in the ukulele band, and a young PC called Akash Lockhart. And really, it's Lockhart who realises that the official story about Lisa's death is probably incorrect, and he sets out to investigate Lisa's death. About a third of the way into the book, there's what I have described at some events as a Jason Bourne moment. You know, remember in the Jason Bourne films, he says, "I remember everything." I got very tired during book tour, and I did an event at Wimbledon where I mistakenly described it as a Matthew Bourne moment. And for those of you who know your ballet, that was a bit of a mistake. You could see the audience really confused. You know, Matthew Bourne, I remember everything, the one where the swan remembers everything. Anyway, a Jason Bourne moment. That's a pop culture reference, not a ballet one. Through her contact with Dalmar, Lisa's memory comes back, and we go back into her past. So for the middle section of the book, you go back, it's narrated by Lisa as a living person in Peterborough. You find out that she's 36, she's a school teacher, she's got a good job, she's good at what she does, she's got her own little flat, she's got a circle of friends. But like a lot of other women of that age, her mid-30s, she's under immense pressure to sort of find the one, find the man, and be in a relationship. And at that point, she meets Matty, who's a junior doctor at the city hospital, and they begin a relationship. And he moves in very quickly. It's a bit of a whirlwind romance, and all her friends start making jokes about wedding bells. And then gradually the relationship with Matty becomes more and more sinister and more toxic. And at this point, I think you begin to realise that what this book is really about is about coercive control and about manipulation and gaslighting. And it's really about the ways in which a relationship can be so toxic that it can lead to somebody's death, even if there's no physical violence involved. And obviously the whole subject of coercive control is such rich territory for a novelist. I mean, when you have the luxury of several hundred pages with which to explore a topic, you can really go into the nuances of a relationship. You can watch the slow deterioration of somebody's belief in themselves, the ways in which a particularly powerful personality can lead an individual to doubt their own sanity, to doubt what's really going on within a relationship. So that was just such fantastic territory to explore, and I really enjoyed it. The bit I'm going to read now, which takes about 5 minutes, this is towards the end of that middle third of the book. So the middle third of the book, you've been in Lisa's real life and you've watched the relationship deteriorate. She's got quite bad insomnia. She's waking up at night. In the final third of the book, we're going to come back to the present. Lisa will be back on the station as a ghost, but this time with a full memory of what happened to her when she was a living person and how she died. But I won't go into that bit because that's where all the spoilers are. So really, just to sort of conclude before I go back to the questions, and I've got a couple of questions about Platform 7 after this that you've sent in advance. I'm just going to do this reading from the very end of that middle third of the book while Lisa is living alive. And this occurs about 3 weeks before she dies, although obviously she doesn't know that yet. So what's happened is the relationship's deteriorating. Lisa has started suffering more and more from insomnia. She's woken up in the middle of the night and she's found that Matty isn't in bed beside her. And she's gone out into the sitting room and he's sitting there cross-legged with the French windows open to a little Juliet balcony looking out over the garden. And this is what happens. I walked closer to him, my bare feet soundless on the carpet. I stood behind him, no more than a metre away, and looked down. I noticed for the first time that there were the faintest signs of his hair thinning at the crown. It was as if his much older self was layered over his present self in that moment, in that pose. Still motionless, he seemed at once an old man and a young boy, sitting on the floor, thinking and waiting for something. In the Matthew of now, I could see Matthew as a child and Matthew as an elderly person, the whole of him encapsulated in that one translatable pose. I took another step towards him. Still, he did not turn, although I was close enough for him to hear my breathing now. What is it about us? Women, I mean, that we are so tender when men drop their guard just for a moment and let their capacity for weakness show? Is it some deeply imprinted desire to mother? Or is it simply that it feels like such a relief to get a glimpse of their susceptibility and to know that in that moment the tables are turned? Looking down at Matthew and seeing the young him and the old him together at once, I was filled with the desire to kneel down behind him and take him in my arms, to wrap my arms around his chest from behind and rest the side of my head against the side of his and rock him, comfort him. Perhaps he would cry a little then and turn to me. Perhaps it was all going to be okay. This might have happened, but before it could happen, he spoke. He stayed motionless, but his voice was clear in the darkness. It was plain and cold. I'm not good for you. There was something about the simplicity with which he spoke. No games, no provocations, just a simple fact. The truth of it made me feel gripped by fear, a sensation as real and as physical as if someone was squeezing my heart in their fist. I did not know what to say. If I agreed with him, it meant the end of our relationship there and then, yet any contradiction of what he said would be a lie, and we both knew it. As I stood there, trapped in that moment, I could not even explain my own fear to myself, the heat that rose to my face, for it was more than fear, of course, it was foresight. I knew that whatever happened between Matthew Goodison and me from now on, it was going to end, and end badly. There was no way out of this that would not entail unpleasantness. It was just a question of what form it would take and how bad it would be. I stood there for a long time. He sat in silence, his back to me, looking out over the garden. Outside, there was nothing. No sound and no movement, only darkness. The plain square of grass, the empty benches, the austere and unforgiving night. So that's the end of the middle third of the book, and you're then going to go back into Lisa's present and find out how she died. One thing I do want to say about Platform 7 before I go back to the questions is I'm very aware that just talking about the subject matter, the kind of bald bones of it, makes it sound as though it's quite a grim and gloomy book. And obviously there's a lot of dark stuff in my book. It's a Louise Doughty novel, that's what you get. But I think ultimately, I hope that the ending of the book is redemptive. I certainly intended that it should be, because I think ultimately what Platform 7 is really about is about love, and in particular the different sorts of love that we all have in our lives. The love that we have for our parents, for our children, for our family, for our friends, even for our work colleagues who might get on our nerves quite a lot of the time. And what you might more widely call a kind of love of humanity, a kind of belief in people's essential goodness. And there's a point in the novel where Lisa says something along the lines of, I'm not ruling out romantic love, I just wish I had kept more of a sense of proportion. And there's a reason why I made Matty a junior doctor. I was playing with a romantic stereotype there. And what I was trying to say is, yes, of course, romantic love is all well and good. But actually, for many, many women and indeed men, there are so many other loves in our lives. And society does still put immense pressure on us to believe that the romantic love of our lives is going to be everything, the most important decision we make, the most important person we are ever with, and that person is going to be everything to us. And of course, for the vast majority of us, that's not the case. You know, if you're running a home or raising a family, or even just have an absorbing job or lots of friends, there are many, many other sorts of loves in your lives. So I think really that's what the book is about. So what I'll do now for a few more minutes is I'll look at the other questions that were sent in advance. I think if you have anything you're burning to ask, you can send it and I'll see, but I can't guarantee that because, as has already been proven, the technology is not my strong point. But the 4 Indies very sensibly sent me some questions in advance, so I will answer those at least. Platform 7, where the idea came from, we've talked about that. I've done the reading. The start is gruesome without spoilers, but you capture the moment and the suspense lingers. What is the secret to a page turner? Gosh, you know, if I knew the answer to that, I'm not sure I'd tell you all because I'd probably be selling it on the black market for secrets or something. What is the secret to a page turner? I love this question because to me it is endlessly fascinating. What is there in a story that makes us really need to know the rest of it at a most kind of fundamental level. You know, why do we turn the page? Why do we, you know, you hear people gossiping on a bus back in the days when we were all taking buses. You know, occasionally you'll tune in and you'll think, oh wow, I really want to hear the end of that conversation. You know, what is it that does that? I think that storytelling is innate in quite a kind of prehistoric way. You know, I think that when people were off hunting the woolly mammoth, you know, they would come back, and over the far side they will tell the story of how they tracked the mammoth down, how they killed the mammoth. And obviously that was to do with survival of the species. You needed to know where the mammoth might be found and how you could get the best of him. So, you know, that's my knowledge of prehistory exhausted. There is something innate in us that I think wants to know the end of a story. I think ultimately, if I had to define it, if you were really holding my feet to the fire, I would say that the secret to a page turner can be found in character and in character development. Because if you can have a novel which is all event, that with hugely dramatic things happening, with helicopters dropping out of the sky, or, you know, train crashes or whatever, bombs exploding everywhere, and it can still lie flat on the page. And I think what it comes down to is, if you don't really believe in the characters in that book, if you don't really care about what happens to them, then it doesn't really matter how dramatic it gets. You're not going to be bothered either way. Whereas if you really, really care about what happens to somebody, then the actual events of the novel may be nothing more dramatic than somebody stubbing a toe, or somebody having a realization about themselves, and that novel can still be compulsive. So it's not really about the magnitude of the event. I think it's about whether or not you care about the person that's happening to. There's a wonderful novel, one of my favourites, called Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson. Very short book, 200 pages, not many words on the page. And there's really, if you ask me to describe the plot of that book, I couldn't really tell you, in the sense that it's two young sisters who live with a couple of eccentric aunts and their lives. And yet I found it compulsively readable, because I just felt that she sketched the characters so well, with such brief but such convincing brushstrokes, that I really, really wanted to know what happened to them. So yeah, page turner, create good characters, I think, is the answer. Your plot lines are always fabulous. Thank you to whoever said that. Do you know where the story is going? No, is the answer. Sorry, I was trying to think of a more intellectual way of putting that. Haven't got a clue. Not a Scooby. I throw myself in. I mean, somebody who interviewed me the other day said, are you a plotter or a plunger? And I thought it was a really good way of phrasing it. I'm definitely a plunger. I throw myself in. I wrote Platform 7. I just knew that this character was on the station at 4 a.m. I didn't know who she was. I knew she was about to witness something terrible, and I knew she was already dead. That was it. That was all I knew when I started Platform 7. And Apple Tree Yard, I wrote the prologue first, and I wrote a scene with a woman on the witness stand at the Old Bailey giving evidence in her own trial. I didn't know who she was. I didn't even know what she'd been charged with. There were only two things I knew. I knew that it was her lover in the dock with her, and that her husband was in the public gallery. And I knew that she was about to be exposed in a very damaging lie. And that was it. And, you know, you start a novel, you create a character, you put them in a situation, and then you have to spend 300 pages working out what the hell is going on. So a lot of novelists will tell you otherwise. A lot of novelists will plan more thoroughly, but I really don't know when anything's going when I start. I throw myself in, and then I work it out as I go along. So 2 more questions, and I think we'll make these the last ones. I haven't seen any questions pop up on this sidebar, but it may have been that you have, and I just can't see them because I'm a complete idiot. But I will answer these last 2 questions, and then we'll wrap up unless somebody tells me that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. And they're both lockdown questions, which is reasonable enough considering the situation we're all in at the moment. What are you reading during lockdown? Somebody has asked. It was very odd. The first 2 or 3 weeks, one of the most disturbing things for me was I found my concentration was shot to bits. I don't know about you lot, but it was the uncertainty. It was not really knowing what lockdown was, what it would mean, and also that feeling that we just didn't know how huge this thing was going to get. We didn't know how close it was going to come to our own families, to the people we cared about. And I've been lucky. I mean, nobody in our immediate family has died. I've got several close friends and colleagues who've been very ill with COVID-19. I lost an elderly uncle and a friend in Australia, but nobody within our immediate family has been affected. We've all been well. And it still took several weeks to think, okay, we're probably going to be okay. And I think at that point my concentration returned and I could get back to writing and to a bit of reading. So I've just finished the Oyinkan Braithwaite, My Sister the Serial Killer, which I hadn't caught up with yet and which I absolutely loved. Platform 7 is on the long list for the Theakston Old Peculier Crime Novel of the Year. So I'm thrilled to bits about that because it's a weird book, Platform 7, you know, to have this kind of strange ghost story on that list is very exciting. So I'm going to read a few more of those. Neil Mukherjee, Will Dean I want to catch up with because I love a bit of Scandi Noir and I think that's what he writes. I've also read, I'm just thinking what's on my pile, Alice Jolly, Dead Babies in Seaside Towns, lovely memoir about her stillbirth and how she did surrogate parenting after that. Beautifully written book, very sort of touching and interesting. And Mary Carr, The Art of Memoir, I've picked up. And although it's specifically about, I mean, she wrote The Liars Club and she's an expert on memoir, there's actually so much in that that is about the craft of writing in general. So it's a book that I'd recommend to any of you for that reason. And I'm currently reviewing a book for the New York Times, but I won't say what that is because it's not been published yet. What are you most looking forward to when lockdown ends? Yes, gosh. Well, I'm going to talk from a writerly point of view here because obviously what I'm looking forward to is what we're all looking forward to, which is seeing family and friends and being able to hug people and being able to have friends around, even if it's only in the garden. I can't wait to the point where we can get to do that. And that sort of stuff. I mean, obviously theatre, art galleries, all those sorts of things, who knows how long it will be before we get all that back. But to think about it from a professional or writing point of view, personally, I've always been a big user of cafes, and my writing routine pre-lockdown was always very much, when I was working on a book, was to put my laptop in a backpack, put my notes for the novel, whatever I was reading, go for preferably quite a walk, well, at least half an hour, sometimes an hour before I started, settle down in a cafe, get a very strong coffee and a breakfast, open my laptop. And it was a kind of Pavlov's dog thing for me. It was such a strong routine. I would make a point of not looking at email, not looking at anything else, getting straight down to the writing and banging away. And in fact, a lot of the local cafes know me now and know my order. And it surprised me to realise in lockdown how dependent I had become on that routine and how important it was for me to actually leave the house and really just to get away from the domestic space. And that was true even if the house was empty, which it isn't always. So yeah, that's the thing I'm most looking forward to. And also, of course, research. What I've been saying about Platform 7 and indeed, in fact, all my novels, I've realised how much my imagination has always been fed by concrete reality. by going out and tracking my novel down, by finding the territory of my novel and exploring it. And, you know, if I'm not able to do that for a while, then obviously I'm going to have to find other ways to feed the imagination through online research and through reading. And that's a big difference for me. I love travel and I love research and I love being nosy and going and nosing around places where I'm not supposed to be. So I think that's the thing that I'm really, really looking forward to when lockdown finishes. So I think I'll wrap up now. I hope that's okay. But thank you all for tuning in. It was really, really nice of you, and particularly for your patience, as it was a bit like getting somebody to talk down the aeroplane. Finding somebody who could actually tell me what the hell to do with this. It is my first ever Facebook Live. I'm very, very grateful to the four indies, Lingham's, Booker, Bookish and Forum Books. And I know the fact that you are all here means you support independent booksellers anyway, but do please keep supporting them. We want that high street to survive, and we want those fantastic booksellers to survive, because top of the list of things I'm looking forward to on a personal level is being able to wander into my local bookshop and browse. So do please continue to support the indies, and thank you to the indies themselves for setting this all up and for talking me through it. So have a nice evening, everybody, and I'll hit the final button now, I think.